So good afternoon, or actually maybe good morning to some of you around the world. Welcome you all to this Fireside chat on the digital legacy. This event has been organized by CMS in collaboration with GTWN, Global Telecom Women's Network, led by our dearest Skanda Johnson, who also kindly joined us today. My name is Maria Gonzalez Gordon, Co-Global Head of the CMS Digital Business Practice and also the company partner at CMS Spain. So as part of this series of webinars on the digital generation, today we will be discussing how will future generations be shaped by the actions of founders in digital technologies today. For these purposes, we are honored to be joined by two top industry veterans, Lucy Lombardi and Nicola Palmer. So Lucy Lombardi currently heads the Technical Partnership Governance, Safety and Certification Department in Telecom Italia, where among other responsibilities, she's involved in the ongoing delayering of the fixed access network within Telecom Italia. Lucy has been nominated by Mobile Communication International and Telecoms among the most influential women in TLC and Digitalic, among 15 most influential Italian women in digital. So thank you very much for joining us, Lucy.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have the privilege of being joined by Nicola Palmer, Nikki, as a distinguished technology executive with over 30 years of experience, 33 I heard, right, a couple of minutes before this one, in various, so lots of experience in various leadership positions at Verizon. Most recently, Nicola was Verizon Chief Technology Ambassador, where she worked with business leaders, industry partners and consortiums, nonprofit and universities to ensure Verizon remained at the forefront of technology and innovation. She also served as Verizon Chief of Product Development Officer, overseeing the exploration of new technologies and creation of products and platforms that solve problems for individuals, enterprises, and society. So thank you very much for joining us today, Nikki.
Thanks, pleasure to be here.
So thank you also very much for all of you attending and accepting this invitation, and particularly for you ladies to share your wisdom and experience. First block of questions that I would love to share with you and relate a little bit to set the scene. So it's kind of a healthy thing to review where we come from and where we are going to. So my first question would be a little bit to go and to look back as a starting point. So, and this is a question to probably both of you ladies. So I recall that when we start using the internet, I have to wait at least like 5 minutes for my modem to work, and then after 2 or 3 minutes for a website to open. And now I may probably be mad and calling my IT guys if it takes more than 10 seconds. So something wrong is clearly happening to me. So in your views, what has happened in the last year that all significantly lack of patience, kind of perseverance and frustrations tolerance? Has technology play a role in that? Is it something that industry is actually considering? Who wants to do this one?
I can go first if you like. So hi everybody.
Yes.
Well, I think the world that we are in today is very different than the world that we grew up in. Of course, we all grew up with a landline phone, so we had no privacy when we had to talk to our first boyfriends and maybe to our girlfriends. I remember having to do my thesis on a computer that was in the lab, and it was a shared computer that we all had to use. Today, I see my children, they're in their 20s today, and they're basically writing their work for university on their mobile phones. And they're doing a lot of work together on these digital platforms. So it's really a different world than the world we grew up today. So technology has played a significant role in these past, I would say, 20 years. And this is mostly due to mobile and to the internet that has created some tools and some availability that today we didn't have when we were growing up, and that today our kids benefit from. Nicola?
Yeah, I can add. No, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the interesting things to think about too is, I also have kids in their 20s, and how differently they look at the world and use technology than we did when we were their age. But think about how we use technology compared to the generation before. So, each generation is bringing such amazing utility that is driven by technology. And I feel so fortunate that our industry is really at the heart of much of that. And, we've had the privilege of, having this front row seat as, the digital age has really come about. And it's the source of a lot of, good fun and laughter when you talk to the kids about, taking a road trip. They don't even think about where they're going before they, hop in the car and, pull up their destination, and they just trust everything they get. I mean, I remember preparing for road trips at the kitchen table with a series of maps with my father. I was lucky enough to, borrow the car for a small amount of time, but getting there was a whole other thing. And, that's just one small example. Kids today, are digital natives. They grew up with these things, in their hands. And I think your question, Maria, was also directed towards, what does that mean in terms of impatience? And there's been a lot that's written about how connected we are to our devices, the good and the bad, right? It can be very problematic for mental health, and the way that we are, our brains are evolving is we probably won't know for maybe 50 years what, this sort of access to information and the way that we have it now that we never did before is really doing to our neural pathways and evolution. I firmly believe that, we are changing the way our brains are wired because of this. But what this means for our industry, I think, and the way I think about this often is, that impatience is a pressure. It's a pressure on our industry, but it's not something we should shy away from. It's a higher gear, as we like to always say at Verizon, that, we have work because our customers demand high quality products and services. And that is always changing. Requirements are always getting more stringent. And that means we have to also raise our game. So yes, in the past, when we were okay with things taking a long time to pop up on our ancient computer tubes, but today, if we don't get something immediately on our phones, it's not acceptable. So listen, it's a sign of the times. It is a pressure, but we have to rise to that pressure is the way that I see it, and it's only going to get more intense going forward.
Exactly. Actually, I learned that you have kids. So actually, you may probably agree with me that in the current state hypothesis, our generation got kind of trained to react to the stick by providing always a better performance or never kind of complained. But the stick approach seems no longer work very well with the new generations, who may probably even copy paste from ChatGPT results for doing their homework or without well understanding the consequences. So even there are experts who think that they are clearly a current generations driven, always trying to seek it for a little bit of motivation. Is that part of the past digital legacy, or do you think that technology may have played a role in that? And in such a case, how technology companies may approach that in the future?
Yeah, I'll start there, and I know Lucy will have some comments here too. I don't know, I reject it a little bit. I think that, positive reinforcement and excitement around goal attainment is a much better way to get, compliance or the direction that you want to go as a leader, as a parent. You take your pick. There's a place for the stick, I suppose, and certainly there are times, for example, in crisis where command and control type of leadership style is, works better than something else. But I do think that this generation, I know my kids still respond to the stick when I pull it out every once in a while, the proverbial stick, you know, the the virtual stick. So I don't think they're completely, you know, only want the positive, but I do think it's a much better way. And I think our leadership styles, as you start to see much more women in the workplace, women in leadership, that has had a profound effect on how we manage the workplace. And obviously, I think that's much to the better. So yeah, I think it's just, it's an evolution.
Fantastic.
Just to second what Nikki was saying, I think it's a lot of a matter of education of the newer generations, and in terms of how to use this digital technology and how to what to expect from this digital technology. Now, how can that education be provided is a little bit tricky, because not all parents are lucky, like I have been, like Nikki has been, to understand and to work in this technology, and therefore be in a position to be able to explain to our children how to use it in a healthy way, and not to, let's say, fall into the pitfalls that this digital technology uses. But not all parents have this privilege. I've had some friends ask me to explain to their children about privacy issues, for instance, because they were unable to understand it and to explain it. This is just a way to say that those next generation that doesn't have this kind of education, all they see is maybe these success people that make a lot of money on TikTok or on Instagram, and sharing sexy pictures, and then they get advertisings, and then they get money out of that. And it seems to be a lazy and an easy way to make money, to feel successful, and that's where the laziness may come. But I think at the core of this, there's a matter of education.
Absolutely agree with you, ladies. So we have been thinking a little bit on looking at back and trying to now to focus a little bit more on looking ahead, about the new generations. Clearly, and you were actually speaking or talking about that. They demand like fast, immediate, and very intense experiences. Otherwise, they get easily bored. So instant knowledge has to be always available at their fingertips, and fast changing trends. And so how does a company stay at the cutting edge and becomes competitive?
I'll go first with this, because I headed innovation within my company, and that really was an eye-opener to me. And I think as telecom industry, we really tried for a long time to be at the forefront of innovation. Most companies tried working on smart home, developing new products, partnership with multimedia, trying to develop that kind of business. Mobile financial industry was tried to develop, other operators focused on that. Most of these were not at the end very successful. And I think at the core, big companies should not chase innovation as it is, but should chase innovation, obviously, that can scale, that can work, that responds to demands of customers and can simplify the life of customers. I believe the pandemic that we all went through was a fantastic example of great innovation that was introduced, but practical innovation. We all had to book our vaccinations online, for instance, and just that previously to the pandemic, I remember we had to go queue in line and get our papers for the vaccination. And so it's simple. It's just a new way of doing old things, but it's applying innovation to simplify our lives. And that's the innovation that companies should focus on, and that will stick, and that will actually provide revenues.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're not innovating, you got to ask yourself, what are you doing? You're stagnating or stepping backwards. So, you know, a culture, to me, that supports new ways of thinking and it is paramount. And, you know, to Lucy's point, it doesn't have to be, you know, this, you know, nugget of an idea. I think when people think of innovation, they just think startups. They think about some brilliant person that has like this amazing idea and they struggle and they finally make it big. I mean, that is only one very small part of innovation. And I would argue that in our industry, not much happens by just the amazing work of one person. It is an ecosystem. It's not only just teams of people within a company, but it's an ecosystem of, you know, different companies in somewhat even different industries that must come together to do anything of significance, anything at scale. So innovation to me is critically important, but it's not how always people think about it. And I mean, you can innovate on a process to make something a little bit more streamlined for a customer, and that could save your company millions of dollars and provide increased satisfaction. I mean, those are the types of innovations I get excited about, because the other ones are just too few and far between. And it's a matter of luck in a lot of cases, luck and timing. Sometimes you have there is a great idea, but it just it's not the right time. I mean, there's countless examples of this in history of great innovations that were just a little bit too early, and 20 years, 50 years later, they're mega hits. So, you know, but if you're not, as leaders, and to the audience out there, you know, keeping yourself current is critically important. I know in my career and Lucy's, I believe in yours as well, like we've always stayed or tried to stay on the cutting edge of technology. And, you know, even back when that cutting edge was copper wires and DSL and ISDN and those, you know, those technologies that we've long ago, you know, sort of decommissioned, but they were cutting edge. And as you continue to learn, that's what's exciting about our industry. It's always changing. It's always getting better. So staying up with what's happening now is a challenge, but it always has been and it always will be. So if you don't have that learning mindset, which fuels innovation, I fear you're in for a tough go of it, because, you know, things are changing so fastly, so quickly. And just think about generative AI. I mean, yes, people were talking about this a few years ago, but geez, my mother knows what the heck it is now, and she's asking me about ChatGPT. I mean, that is mainstream. So
yeah, absolutely.
and that can happen like this. So, you know, do you think there are leaders and CEOs out there who really, you know, didn't know what it was? There absolutely are. And, you know, so what do? Do you say, oh, I can't do this if tech is passing me by? Well, you can, but you can also lean into it. And I think that's what we all have to do. And that's part of the fun of the industry to me.
I could not be in more agreement with you, but I was thinking about, you know, how technology and social media and the new app developments have brought to the table amazing topics like mental health or care for the environment, work-life balance, diversity and inclusion, even women empowerment. So those topics are probably now, and thanks to, you know, how widespread information is now, thanks to these technologies, how those topics are now part of a larger amount of, you know, of population due to tech. So any of you may probably think on other topics and realities that may be brought in the next years to come. Maybe Lucy, you want to comment on that one?
Yes, I think, well, these, let's say the sexy topics like AI, generative AI, deep fake, false news, we're all talking about these new, let's say, innovation and pitfalls that are coming. Even quantum computing, we were talking before with Candace about it, is an interesting topic. But I believe that going forward, one fundamental topic to address will be the energy aspect and the energy used by all this digital technology. I downloaded some data just to have some idea, but for instance, data centers, which basically are big warehouses full of servers, that support all our digital social networks, online gaming, media, and everything. They consume a lot of energy, and both to power the servers, but also to keep them cool. And for instance, in EU, it's estimated that between 2018 and 2030, the increase in consumption of these data centers energy will pass from 2% to 3.2%. So that's an incredible increase. It seems like a small percentage, but if you think of all the data centers we have, the increase is a lot. As a general ballpark figure, the European Climate Pact that was recently, it's public on internet, it estimates that digital technologies account for 8 to 10% of energy consumption. And this is only data centers. Then we think of AI, for instance. AI consumes massive amount of energies, and until you solve the energy consumption problem of AI is only a trend we're all talking about, but it's not easily accessible and it's not widespread. It is believed that AI basically consumes as much as the whole energy of a small country like Ireland. This was an article on the New York Times, for instance. So until you solve these underlying problems, and you make quantum computing is another example. Quantum computers use massive amount of energy. So we're all talking about it, the potential they have, but nobody actually has seen a quantum computer, or very few quantum computers out there. And so what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of potential technology out there, but the underlying issue to be solved going forward is how much energy does this new technology actually use? And in order to have this new technology or innovation scale, we need to solve the energy problem first.
Completely agree.
That's amazing. Thanks for those facts, Lucy. It makes me think about the connection, the role that technologists need to play, have needed to play, and will need to play even more going forward in connecting those dots. Because we can talk about all of these great things that technology will enable, but unless we get like-minded, diverse groups of people together that can actually figure out the energy requirements and innovate around solutions towards that, we won't realize the full potential. I remember too, this is a strange example, but I remember back in the early days when we were making some great progress with mobile technology, we had to get the app developers on board with the new lower latency that mobile networks could provide at scale, the new types of bandwidth and throughput, speed that you can get from mobile networks, because they weren't assuming any of that. They were designing all their applications for Wi-Fi and, doing all kinds of things to favor Wi-Fi and to make up for Wi-Fi, et cetera. So like that was a strange moment in time, but now when mobile networks have improved so much globally, applications can use the new currencies, the new abilities that mobile networks provide. This is sort of the same now in a way on a much bigger scale with the problems that the world is facing. Technology will be part of the solution. I'm convinced. You can't name a single problem that I think even in the geopolitical realm, that technology won't have or shouldn't have a place in helping to solve. But you need to be able to say, well, here's what tech can provide. To Lucy's point, here are the problems, here's other things we need to solve, and connect those dots so that we can actually realize, that potential.
Again, couldn't be more agreement. So basically, one of the big blocks of questions that I was also willing to discuss with you is ethics. So to what extent do you consider ethics should rely on companies rather than on the regulator? So for instance, the AI guidelines were adopted by each company and not attending to the ones established by the regulator. So what are your comments on who should be bear this really relevant topic? It's a question of the regulators, it's more a question of the company. Should we, what are your opinions on this one?
I'm happy to start. It's both. It's always has been both, and it always needs to be both. And ultimately, you know, when you talk about ethics and integrity, it also is down to the individual, and it's down to culture in regulatory bodies, cultures in companies, cultures in teams. I mean, you know, you're not going to get too far if you really are not thinking about, you know, what integrity means to you personally, what your ethics are, and then how you bring that to work, how companies organize around that. Now, all that being said, there's some very real, you know, meaty issues out there, and there's a variety of solutions that, you know, smart people can debate. And but I think in the end, from a company perspective, you want a seat at the table, because be too much distance between the work, the connection to the customer, and I'm not just talking about, you know, fiduciary responsibility and, you know, making a buck for shareholders. I'm talking about people who really understand the tech and where it's going, what it can do, what the ethical challenges, you know, may be because of it. So that's a, you know, working together to do that. There can be distance between that and governmental bodies, but governmental bodies can also see a picture that maybe individual companies can't see, right? They can see a bigger picture. They can see geopolitical issues. They are responding to the broad population, not just a particular customer base. So there's clearly a role for both, but, you know, one without the other, in my view, is going to suboptimize the solution. So you know, it's again a time for working together on these tricky issues.
I couldn't agree more with Nicola. It's with Nikki. Sorry. So,
Dad still calls me Nicola. It's fine.
It's. I think it's also a matter of. I mean, I think everybody believes in adopting ethical solutions and products and procedures, both companies and especially regulators, and it's a partnership that have to work together, and especially customers have to expect it from companies. What I believe, there's also a matter of speed in adopting ethical solutions or guidelines within companies, because as technology evolves very quickly, it's very hard to understand what kind of positioning to adopt. So sometimes you will have regulators moving forward quicker than companies, and so companies will have to adopt what regulators impose on them. And sometimes you will have companies that, as Nikki was saying, you have to have a broader view, maybe have a better understanding as to what is going on, and they will self-adopt some principles. AI is a clear example, at least in Europe, because the European regulation sort of struggled in terms of defining what AI needs to be, and most European companies, especially telco companies, adopted AI ethical guidelines within their own company. So they self-declared AI ethical guidelines, waiting for the European regulation on AI. So I think it's just a matter of who moves first, but at the end, it's a partnership between all the players.
Fully agree, and you maybe probably agree with me that is, you know, when your companies like yours that are based in different jurisdictions, it might be like extremely tough to you know, to address those dilemmas, considering that there are different jurisdictions with different legal approaches, and still you're a global company, so you have kind of established a policy. So is there any wisdom that you want to share on that side?
It's really tricky, and you know, it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you know, governments, nations are sovereign entities. They have the ability to regulate and to different extents in different places. So, you know, I'm not sure I have any wisdom other than, you know, in country for country, I think is an important thought there, if that makes sense. In other words, if you're providing services in a country, you need to have a presence, in my view. You need to show up, you know, for the people there, for your products and services, for the government. You know, being able to integrate with a deeper level of knowledge than you know, just coming from Washington D.C., for example, and doing, you know, something in a you know, completely other side of the world. So it's tricky, and you know, as Lucy knows very well, when you're designing networks, there really aren't natural country, you know, state, province, whatever boundaries, right? Those are artificial. You know, your network is really not designed efficiently that way. So you know, designing networks to respect all of what needs to be understood and complied with in different countries is quite a challenge. But you know, and that again, back to just the partnership. Here's, you know, here's what we can do and how we can do it, and then here's what's required and why, and working through it.
So probably a third block of questions, as we're running kind of in the middle of this session today, would be in relation to governance and kind of product responsibility. So and maybe, I mean, you can split, you can share whatever you want here. I mean, experiences from your peers or experiences from your own companies. Is there any great example of a company, or again, that you have, you know, developing within your company, or that you know from your peers that in terms of product responsibility, you want to share?
I can kick off, Nikki, if you're happy with that. Because within my company, we have really, well, we've always had an attention towards sustainable development, but since 2020, we really kicked off a core strategy and put sustainable development at the center of our strategy. And we set out some targets in terms of environmental, social, and governance areas. And we integrated them within our business plan. So it wasn't only storytelling, it was actually integrated into the execution of and operations of the company. We focused on 4 main areas. One was environment protection, promoting also circular economy, and digital growth for Italy. So a lot of education, for instance, in there, and strengthening the internal governance on sustainable development. I won't go into too much details, but following this, let's say, high-level description, some specific measurable targets were identified, and year by year these targets are measured and the advancement, let's say, achieved. We have it also in our, for instance, objectives, personal objectives, is we have a sustainability target. As a result of this strategy, we have let's say our, you know, that sustainable development, there are some certification authorities that provide a feedback as to how you are doing, and our, let's say, rating have increased dramatically, and we've been mentioned in several reports on this sustainable development. So it has been a success story, and from a cultural point of view, also internally, employees are much more aware about this from a day-to-day basis, which is also very good.
Yeah, I can add to that. I mean, I think many companies in our industry have been pretty forward thinking about ESG goals and sustainability goals. I mean, there's always a higher gear, and there's companies that are pushing for more and some that are not as aggressive. But you know, certainly from a climate perspective, it's, I mean, you know, I'm not an expert, but it's a topic of much debate among industry as well as governments, and it was, you know, front and center at the UN here recently. When it comes to, you know, sustainability, and, you know, my time at Verizon, I was always very proud of our commitment and our path towards net zero. We did a bunch of green bonds that we issued that were very, very successful. You know, our energy use and transition to renewable energy is on a solid path too. We're always trying to do more there, reducing carbon emissions, et cetera. So, I mean, all of those are critical, you know, in the path. And our industry, frankly, I think we all need to do more. And really lean into this, because, you know, just tying back to what Lucy said earlier, and the energy that's needed by our networks and the compute power that is demanded by these new technologies is changing network topologies and sucking up energy. So we've got to figure this one out collectively.
Sure. And probably one of the latest blocks of questions that I like to discuss today is digital inclusion. So what would you say to an 18 years old person that is about to start studying at university or start working, choosing a career path?
Yeah, I could start there. I mean, I'm so impressed by this generation. I got to tell you, they are so smart. They're so willing to learn. They're so purpose driven. They want to solve big problems, and their ability to just, you know, pick things up and go is amazing. So I know a lot of people are frustrated by what is seen as impatience in this generation, the need to rapidly scale the corporate ladder of this generation. But I got to tell you, in total, I think they're absolutely amazing. And all of us that are more at the closer to the tail ends of our career than the beginnings of our career, we can learn a lot from them. So I would tell them things, but I would also be listening. It is one main point. Listen, I have one child just graduated college, and others in college, and I got one in high school. So I'm giving this type of advice all the time. It's not always being, you know, listened to, but I'm giving it all the time. But I would tell, and I continue to tell them and anyone who will listen, that technology needs to be a part of your education. I fully understand and agree with the fact that, you know, it may not be the centerpiece of what you want to do with your life. But as I'm often quoted as saying, if you want to be a farmer or a fashion designer, technology will make you a better one. It is a part of every industry in every single way, and you really can't get by without it, in my view. So that would be my number one piece of advice is, you know, find a way to stay current with technology, even if you think it's not your jam. I mean, I have one child that's like, I don't want to program. I'm like, I'm sorry, you got to take one computer programming class. You know, you just got to understand. And it could be data analytics, it could be anything else, but you have to understand, or else you're going to fall behind, in my view, in terms of, you know, how technology can be an enabler to whatever it is that is your passion. So that would be my number one piece of advice.
Good.
Lucy's probably got something better.
We know. I'm also telling my 20-year-olds what to do. But I think we're in the middle of what the World Economic Forum called the cyber physical revolution. So technology is pervasive, and as Nikki was saying, actually, even if you don't want to know about technology, you're actually using a mobile phone. So you know how to put your SIM card inside. You know how to connect it. You know, you're using your computer, so you're using software tools, you're using Word, you're using Excel. So that's really basic, but it's basic technology that maybe previous generations didn't have access to. what I would give as advice as to the next generation is, based on my personal experience, is never stop learning. I mean, when I studied physics, I studied optical physics and robotics, but I could never imagine that I would end up in telecommunications. I could never imagine that the mobile revolution would be so pervasive. And I ended up doing things that not necessarily applied exactly what I had studied. So I think the next generation will be more and more like that. They will, of course, study, learn some skills, but then throughout their career, they have to get into the mindset that never stop learning.
Fully in agreement. Is nail it. So another block of questions could be related to the digital regulation. So in the current scenario that we are living here in Europe, but probably also you too in the United States, of waves, massive waves of new digital regulation that needs to be implemented, companies and organizations facing the need to make initial decisions. So how that kind of decisions that they have to understand to what extent, how they want to be perceived amongst peers, and how they want to be remembered by society from what they did when they were facing these digital regulations wave coming. What kind of actions have you taken in your current positions or previous roles to make sure that you are kind of a surfer and not rather than a drifter?
I believe it's not a single action. It's really a day-to-day approach to new things, because today we are facing evolution and new dilemmas, and there's no really rule book as to how to, especially as managers within a company that's quickly evolving. So we daily have to make decisions and implement new procedures and advocate also for new ways of doing things within our companies, within our teams. And so it's more about the values you bring as a manager within your company than that single action that had its effect, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, on a tactical level, I think it's a good strategy to make time in your schedule, in the day, in the week, in the month, in the year, for learning. I mean, you have to to survive, I think. And it always seems like there's not enough time, or there's other priorities that get in the way, but that to me is how you surf, as opposed to get crushed by the waves that come. You're going to feel the pressure of those waves, but the only way to rise above is to really, go with that flow and be willing to learn. And it's a matter of ego too. I mean, sometimes you have to put the ego aside. Some people still feel like the executive or the manager or the person in charge is the one that should have all the answers. And I think those days are gone. And that's why it's a matter of, learning. And as I said before, learning from this current generation coming up, because, they're pretty impressive and they're not afraid to tell you. So it's good to keep the ears open.
Thank you very much for sharing that one. Actually, we would love to hear more about from our attendees. So please include in your chat all the questions to these great ladies. I mean, they're here to help you to answer your questions, your comments, your suggestions. So actually, we have one question from Piero Celan. He's willing to have you be on, do digitally native companies will be more prepared to deal with digitally native consumers?
I definitely think so, because we know, first of all, because we experience the technology ourselves, And second of all, because we are able, I think, to understand a little bit better. We ourselves are consumers. So the employees of a telecommunication company are consumers themselves. So we are in a better position to actually explain the technology we're selling than to a maybe non-digital native person than maybe other companies.
Yeah, I agree, Lucy. I think you know, you have to meet customers where they're at. And you know, someone who is a digital native is going to have certain requirements and demands. They're going to speak a certain way. They're going to want to deal with customers, or excuse me, with companies that meet them where they're at. So, you know, just take an example like paper billing. You know, that was a big thing. You know, like, can we do away with paper billing over time? It'll save money. It's better for the environment. And you know, the digital native is like, what are you even talking about? You better not send me a paper bill, or else it's not going to get paid, you know, because I'm not checking it. So, you know, but I would also argue that, you know, that there are a set of customers out there who want something like that, or who aren't digital native, and companies that are, you know, as have a responsibility and want to have that responsibility of serving a broader population, they have to be mindful of both. And that's a tricky space. So it's about understanding the different segments of customers and where they come from. And that's why, for example, well, two things. Number one, companies that are small and digitally enabled and native can move fast. And that's a great thing. And that's why it's hard for larger companies to move as fast. But that's the trick for leadership, is to try to feel and act like a small company with the resources and the institutions of a large company. If you can figure that out well, that's the trick. And then that's also why a company like Verizon and others have done this as well, you know, experiment with sub-brands. So we have a brand that's called Visible that is 100% digital, 100% digital. And, you know, there are no stores, there are no bills, everything is online, really geared towards that digital native. And that's doing very well. It's not for everybody, but it is certainly for a segment of the population. And so those are the types of things I think that that larger companies need to do to stay relevant to this generation.
So I hope that Piero received you where you were willing, but if you want to add something on that, please feel free to do so. While we were waiting to enter in the spiritual room, we were having a little talk on the new trends, on the big trends of tech. I know that Lucy is not like a big fan about trends and tech trends, but I would love to hear you about, you know, your vision in regards to these new trends. What will we be facing in the next years to come?
Just to clarify, I'm a fan of trends that work, not of trends that are just communication trends. So I'm very practical, pragmatic from that point of view.
You're right. You're right. No, but yes, please, you know, share your comments on that.
Well, I think every industry will have to look at the trends that work, or the next big thing that works for their own company. From a telecommunication perspective, it really depends whether you're working in a developing market or a highly developed market. In Italy, we have a penetration rate, that means how many people actually have a connectivity or have a mobile phone, that's almost 90%. And this, of course, includes newborn babies and elderly. So we have a very high penetration rate. We have coverage that basically covers most of the population. So the basic growth, or the next big thing in terms of innovation within our company, is on one side providing those services that can be new revenue generating streams. But I will confess that the most focus now is innovation for internal procedures. So how do we improve, or how do we do cost cutting and improve our internal procedures using innovation. So using, for instance, AI to help us to better filter out the trouble tickets that come from our network. How we use IoT to actually measure or monitor the longevity of the poles for our telecommunication network before they fall down on somebody's head. How we use drones, for instance, to check our radio base stations up on the pole without having somebody climb up the ladder and go up there with the risk of being injured. So these are the big the next very concrete innovations that we're looking into.
I couldn't agree more, especially the use of AI for internal operations. I think that is sort of getting missed in the conversation a bit, because people are talking about, you know, well, it's a very broad topic, but for industry, I think AI can provide amazing utility in the ways that Lucy described, and leaning into that and figuring that out with employees right by your side who know the processes best is really the right way to go. You know, when I think about trends, you know, there are certainly, you know, we can't dismiss the wireless trends, I would say, or the technology trends just for our industry. They've been here for a bit, but I mean, they're really starting to cook. You know, moving content closer to the edge. I mean, whether you call it mobile edge compute or whether you just are changing your topology to have, you know, additional resources closer to where customers develop them and need them. I mean, that's a major trend, and that is affecting, you know, the wireless industry, the landline industry, the satellite industry, anything that has to do, you know, with serving customers in media, in data, with more content closer to the edge is an enormous trend. Private networking is a huge trend. I mean, do you know any company today that doesn't consider themselves, you know, a wireless company or have a wireless strategy? Every company has a digital strategy for sure, whether it's just to, you know, their own internal operations or to enable a mobile sales force or to connect with their customers. So, you know, every company out there is looking at all of these things. So is it any surprise that these companies would want more control over their networks? And now with different regulation and spectrum policy, et cetera, you know, they're able to do that. So that's a major trend, you know, in our industry with private networking. And you couple, you know, on top of that, network slicing, which is, you know, sort of a uniquely 5G thing that's just starting to get there, but it'll happen. And you know, those things I think are very big trends in the B2B space. Of course, virtualization, not new, software to hardware, but boy, is it everywhere. And it's part of why some of my recommendations to this generation is software, because you know, software will be powering everything. And but that virtualization trend, and whether it's in the core of your network with vRAN or in the edge of it, you know, the radio access network, to me, it's about skills. It's about, you know, how it's about talent and how do you really manage this? Because it's very different with these types of networks than with the networks of the past. There's far more integration that is incumbent upon the operator, as opposed to buying sort of, you know, purpose-built end-to-end solutions from infrastructure providers. So that's another, you know, a big trend and a skill-based one at that. And the last one I'll mention is really like spectrum depth. So if you think of wireless trends, and I'll just speak from a bit of a Verizon perspective on this one. Back in 2000, when Verizon was formed from Bell Atlantic Mobile and 9X and GTE Primeco, all these companies came together, and we had 50 megahertz of wireless spectrum in total. In 2010, when we launched 4G LTE, and you know, ultimately that our performance there really cemented our reputation as a reliable mobile provider, et cetera, we had 100 megahertz in total of spectrum depth. This is on average across the United States. And we launched 4G with 20 megahertz of 700 megahertz spectrum, 10 on the uplink and 10 on the downlink, and that's it. And just to think of that now, if you're in this industry, is sort of crazy. But now, as we go into next year, it will almost be 300 megahertz on average in the US for Verizon wireless of spectrum depth. So what does that mean? It's still probably not enough, but it never is enough, right? You, as an operator, you always, want to have more spectrum. But at the same time, what that means for the operation and for people, it's added complexity. It's, how do I put the right spectrum to use for the right use case for this business and for this consumer at this time in this place? And ultimately that's the work that mobile operators do. And but it's becoming more complex. There are more integration challenges, and certainly more software driven. So that's what I see sort of now and into the future, specifically in the mobile industry.
Well, that's a lot of sharing, actually, a lot of learning today. Thank you very much. I mean, great experience of you. I feel like super privileged of having the chance to spend 1 hour with you talking about even new trends or trends that are coming, and foremost, learning about your experience. You have amazing professional careers. You're an inspiration to many of us. I'm really looking forward to at least have the chance to meet you finally in person in Barcelona during the Mobile World Congress. And any of you actually attending this webinar, you're there, you have a place to be. That the GTWN organized a fantastic event, and yes, please, continue being in touch with you. Thank you very much, Lucy and Nikki and Lucy. It has been a pleasure. Really, thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, everybody.
Yeah, so this webinar is actually one of the latest editions in this series of monthly webinars focusing on the digital generation ahead of the Mobile Century publication by GTWN, due for release in February 2024. So please stay tuned for the next one. Thank you, ladies.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.